In recent years, world development planners have discovered that the centrality of rapid development lies in meaningful empowerment and development of equal gender to contribute and participate in socio-economic development activities globally. This discovery is meant to give birth to equal representation at all levels, since gender promoters believe that what men can do, women can do even better. Nigeria joined the world in this race of promoting equal gender in 2006, when the first policy on promoting gender equality was passed into law. Following the trajectory of world development, promoting gender equality is now globally accepted as a development strategy for reducing poverty levels among women and men, improving health and living standards, and enhancing efficiency of public investments. The attainment of gender equality is not only seen as an end in itself and human rights issue, but as a prerequisite for the achievement of sustainable development. In recognition of the extant national women's policy and other sectoral policies to respond to the challenges of gender inequalities and attendant low socioeconomic indicators, a national gender policy has been developed to replace the women's policy. An extensive research and consultative process informed the gender policy framework, while the goal, objectives, strategies, and targets were adopted by consensus at several national and zonal workshops convened for stakeholders and partners. The goal of the national gender policy is to build a just society devoid of discrimination, harness the full potentials of all social groups regardless of sex or circumstance, promote the enjoyment of fundamental human rights, and protect the health, social, economic, and political well-being of all citizens in order to achieve equitable, rapid economic growth. Evolve an evidence-based planning and governance system where human, social, financial, and technological resources are efficiently and effectively deployed for sustainable development. The national gender policy cuts across several issues such as promotion and protection of human rights, such as abuse, violence, dehumanizing, social justice, such as standpoint of laws on gender matters, and equity, such as social status of both gender in the Nigerian society. So today, we shall be looking critically into several issues around this policy. I am Lydia Odidiochi. Thank you for joining us. Before we continue on our topic, here is the news update. The National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies (NIPSS) (KURU), in collaboration with the Leadership and Ethics Councils, have organized a training course for 250 participants. An opening ceremony was organized at the Institute to welcome the participants. The program, which took place at the Unity Hall of the Institute, had in attendance the representative of the Director General, Brigadier General CFJ Udaya Retired MNI, Secretary and Director of Administration, Professor Shola Adeyonju MNI, Head, Public Affairs Department, members of faculty, heads of departments, and participants drawn from both public and private sectors across the country. While delivering his speech on behalf of the DG, Brigadier General CFJ Udaya Retired MNI stated that the Institute, which is about 45 years in existence, has been formulating policies that are usually implemented for national development. He also added that the course is organized to groom leaders who are selfless and ethical in the discharge of their duties. Some of the newly enrolled participants share their expectations from the course.
Yeah, after here, as a leader and as a leader of an organization, we are here to improve, to get more skills on how to handle all humanities, all their fears, especially in my organization as a council secretary of a local government.
It's going to be exciting, and it is full with a lot of expectation because we have qualified trainers who are going to be training us for the next couple of days. So it is expected that we should get so much in terms of leadership and ethics before we leave here.
Well, we expect so much. I personally, from the resource persons that have been reeled out on the high table, we expect that we're going to have so much that will impact on our service. And it's going to be helpful because this is about leadership. And ethically, that should be the foundation of every policy that is being made from here. And so we expect much.
My expectation is very, very high. Before I was nominated to come and participate in this particular course, we have already started planning for a smart city within my state, the Abakaliki, the capital city, and now to come to be lectured and briefed on issues concerning sustainable city. I think the whole thing is rhyming, and what I'm going to learn here, of course, I'm going to take home and ensure that is actually translated on ground to what we are doing in the capital city of Ebonyi State, which is Abakaliki.
The program, which is organized to solve the challenges of leadership in Nigeria, is expected to last 5 days. Welcome back to our topic today on Policy Focus. As mentioned earlier, we will be looking at several angles to the policy, ranging from the key principles upon which the policy is premised, such as commitment to gender mainstreaming as a development approach and tools for achieving the economic reform agenda, evidence-based planning, value reorientation, and social transformation. Recognition of gender issues are central to and critical to the achievement of national development goals and objectives. Now, what is required to ensure all policies are reviewed to reflect gender implications and strategies as contained in the Gender Policy and Implementation Modalities specified in the National Gender Strategic Framework? Another question is, where does the female gender belong in the society? How do we make people to understand the female gender position in the society? These and many more issues are seeking clarifications and need to be addressed, and that is just what we intend to do here on the program today. To address this, we have a seasoned Nigerian who is at the forefront and a professional in the field of gender studies to provide answers to our questions. Let me introduce the Director of Studies, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Kuru, Jos, Professor Olufumilayo Josephine Paramalam, to do justice to today's topic on Policy Focus. We are now joining Professor Olufumilayo Josephine Paramalam in her MNI in her office to talk more on gender issues. Thank you for giving us audience, ma'am.
Thank you.
There have been so many misconceptions or misinterpretations around the national gender policy.
Right.
As an expert who has researched in this area for more than 20 years now, kindly explain to our viewer what the gender policy is all about.
Thank you very much indeed. And I love that question. And like you rightly said, there's been a lot of misconception. A lot of people think that the gender policy is a women's policy. It's about, women empowerment, women's rights. That is partly true. To understand what the gender policy is about, it's important to understand a little bit about its history. Originally, it was the National Policy on Women, 2001. And the reason why it was National Policy on Women was because after research and gathering of evidence, it was found that there was a huge gap, both culturally, socially, between men and women. But not just culturally and socially, economically, in terms of income earned and benefiting from the national economy, in terms of factoring women's contribution to development in the national accounting system, and also politically in terms of participation and representation. It was seen very clearly that there was a huge gap. I would recall that in 1999, there had been a nationwide survey on positive and harmful cultural practices towards women. Eventually, the word positive was dropped because it was found that across the length and breadth of Nigeria, from north to south, from east to west, across the Middle Belt, generally, cultures were largely harmful in their attitude, in their treatment, even in their conceptualization of what it meant to be a woman. Now, that doesn't mean that there were no positive cultures, but by and large, it was found that the balance weighed in the favor of negativism. And so, the national policy on women came out of a history of women's organizing for change, especially from the global perspective, where you had in Kenya, there had been a conference on the Nairobi forward-looking strategies. The United Nations had its own, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. All of these international instruments led to an understanding that there's a huge gender gap in development in society. Now, somewhere along the line, it was discovered that, look, we are treating women's issues as if it's an island, as if women are just in isolation. They are not part and parcel of the rest of society. Or we are treating women's issues without proper reference to their relative positioning to men. And then it was also discovered that men also have gender issues, that men also have areas where they are impacted negatively because of their gender. And it's not just a woman's thing. And so the national policy on women now became the national gender policy. The national gender policy understands that all human beings are gendered, and we negotiate and mediate our realities based on our gender. And therefore, what we experience in life and what we have access to in terms of societal opportunities, access to privileges, positions, and access even to power. All of this is dependent to a large extent on our gender, but not exclusively on gender. We are also understanding that this gender intersects with other identity markers, such as our ethnicity, our religion, our income, our social location, even our geographic location, whether we live in a rural area or an urban area. All of these intersect with gender. So the national gender policy tries to look at men and women, boys and girls, in their composite whole, in terms of the totality of their context, and to see how their sex and their gender impacts on their ability to access societal benefits, and also impacts on the outcomes from policy, from development, and all of that. Then the aim of national gender policy is to ensure that it tries to, as much as possible, eliminate disparities that are rooted in gender discrimination, stereotyping, and barriers, and let me say structural inequalities, structural violence, for example, that are rooted in culture, rooted in religion, rooted in institutions, laws, policies, and negative societal attitudes.
Ma'am, in your opinion, what is the level of gender mainstreaming in socio-economic development of Nigeria?
That's actually what my lecture was all about. You know, I delivered a lecture on putting gender on the agenda. The whole idea of that lecture was to say that we need to mainstream gender to become part and parcel of all our policy and development planning considerations. And the underlying assumption or the underlying argument I was trying to make is that as at now, we are still paying lip service to gender. As at now, gender is acknowledged. There is rhetoric around gender. We speak gender, gender speak, but we don't act gender. we have not integrated gender effectively, functionally into the way our institutions work, into the way governance works, and particularly at the grassroots level. There's a huge disconnect between the elite discourse on gender and what is happening at the level of the grassroots. Local government, state government, federal government, at every single level of governance, we are yet to really understand that gender is a critical development planning and public policy variable that needs to be factored into all aspects of governance. And it's not about adding women and stirring the mix. It's about understanding that when we want to design policies for the human population, we must design those policies in a manner that shows an understanding that they are differentiated by ethnicity, by religion, by race, by gender. We have to plan accordingly for the population based on their social characteristics and dimensions. And we are yet to do that.
Now, Prof, can you give us in clear terms the current ratio of gender mainstreaming in politics, education, and social status representations in our country?
Okay, so that's another area where we have problem, although I do commend the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics because to a large extent, they have tried to, over the last 5 years or so, they've tried to gather more data, what we call sex disaggregated data for policy and research. But we don't really have a clear-cut data set on gender mainstreaming, so to speak. And I think that shows that we need to do a lot more research on that. I think that is one area where I think this Gender and Public Policy Studies Center that we are trying to bring on stream, where it could benefit from funding to gather some of that sex disaggregated data. That notwithstanding, we do still have some data sets, and I will say that we have a very precarious gender profile, which is also part of my lecture. And in talking about in politics, what we call it is gender representation in politics. And the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has come up with a few statistics. For example, it showed that only 38 females compared to 166 males are judicial officers, for example. They found out that between 1999 and 2021, 0% of the presidents had been female, 0% of vice presidents. They found out that only 15.34% had been ministerial appointments. And then in the National Assembly, it's even far worse. So we've had an over 95% representation of males in the National Assembly since the beginning of the National Assembly. When you compare it to state houses and you put all together, the figure is maybe even more dismal. Local governments, the same. It's even worse at the local government level. So you find a dismal showing of the female gender in politics. And this is not, somebody will say it's for lack of interest. It's not for lack of interest. It's because of the additional barriers that culture and religion and even economics place before women. You have women who want to come out to politics. I've interviewed some of them, and they are told, if you want to go into politics, then you're no longer my wife. You have to choose between the marriage or politics. We've had women who were even given promotions or sent on courses, and they were told that, well, you either choose this course or you choose this promotion or you choose your marriage. You understand? We've had women, and I'm not saying that just out of wanting to say it. I'm saying it because I've interviewed, I've sat with, I have been able to get the stories of researched such people. I've gone to different communities, I've sat with different women from different walks of life who find out that their dreams, their aspirations, and even their contributions to development are truncated simply because they happen to be women. So it's not for lack of interest. Then you also have the issue in terms, I'm talking about political representation in this instance. You have the issue where gender-based violence is a major issue for women in politics. We've had women raped, political women. If some of these female politicians tell you what they go through, you've had them threatened, sexually harassed, and all of that. yes, I understand that there's also the issue of cultural bias. The cultural bias issue is a situation whereby leadership is gender coded. It's gender coded as a male preserve. And so even in society, you find that both men and women very often tend to prefer male leaders simply because of that age-long cultural bias, and the conceptualization of a woman as not being a rightful person to occupy a leadership position. We have lost sight of the fact that leadership is about character. Leadership is about competence. Leadership is about vision and the ability to pursue that vision and accomplish tasks, accomplish goals, accomplish set targets. Literacy, adult literacy. So in terms of adult literacy, right now, we are moving forward. So we have a 77 point something percent for males and 73% for females nationally. However, that seemingly high ratio becomes something else when you look at the geographical comparisons. It masks the fact that there's a huge disparity between female literacy and male literacy in the north and that in the south, where you would have probably in the north about 67% for men and 40-something% for females. So those are some of the very worrisome aspects when it comes to the gender statistics.
Okay, now, Prof, could you point out one or a few cases of cultural barriers to the actualization of gender policy in Nigeria?
There are quite a number of cultural barriers. One of them, has to do with the whole concept of autonomy. What does it mean to be a citizen? What are citizens' rights all about? The concept of citizenship is the concept of an autonomous individual who has certain rights. But because of culture, some rights are not available or easily accessible to women. And I would like to give you an example: freedom of movement. The Constitution of Nigeria guarantees freedom of movement. It also guarantees freedom of conscience, that is the freedom to choose your religion. It also guarantees freedom of association. Freedom of movement, there are some women who are forced by religion to be in seclusion. So automatically that constitutional right, they have no access to it. Freedom of association, you have some women who they cannot belong to a group without taking permission from a husband, or the husband will say, no, I don't give you permission to belong to this group. And I have quite a number of examples of women who wanted to even join a women's group, and the husband said no. I have because I deal also, beyond being a scholar, I'm also a gender activist. And I have come across cases where a woman was not even allowed to bury her dead mother. Her mother died and her husband did not allow her to go to the funeral. It took 12 years before she was able to visit her mother's grave. That's when we talk about freedom of movement. I've also had instances where a woman was not allowed to even go to school. In other words, to pursue her education. But again, that is also a right. Right to education is also truncated. I've had cases where a woman wanted to vote for a particular political party, and the husband said, no way, this is the way we are going, everybody vote. So the culture of male guardianship, male headship, has deeply affected women's ability to exercise their citizenship rights. Let me just quickly recall this man of blessed memory, Chief Solomon Daosheplar. While I was doing my PhD, I had an interview with him. And he said something to me that really shocked me. He said when he was governor, he had 4 women commissioners, 4 female commissioners, and they were the best in his government. And that people would come to him and say, Governor, if all the women, if all your commissioners would be like this woman, you would have an excellent government. That they refuse to take bribe. That these women refuse to take bribe. So I asked him a question. I said, okay, sir, if this was your experience with women who were your commissioners in your government, why didn't you have more of them? He said, oh, He said, you know, women are handicapped, they're under authority. So they can't easily, you know, that some of them, they want to do this, but because of their husband, they cannot. So this is a cultural phenomenon. But what about treatment of widows?
Oh, also an inheritance too.
What about access to land? Access to land, because of cultures that do not give women access to land. Most women agriculturalists, who, by the way, are responsible for 60 to 70% of food production and farming in the country, they're not able to farm on their own lands. They're not able to have access to the income that comes from those lands. So they're like tractors. They're like farming tractors who are just there to work. So these are some of the areas where culture, you know, greatly hinders.
Now, do you think we are still in the era where some people believe a woman's place in the society is in the kitchen or for making babies only?
Oh, definitely. We are still very much in that era. But you see, Nigeria is a mixture of different cultures, traditions, and Nigeria is a country that we are not all in the same time frame. We are a country in transition between the old and the new. And you have some societies have transited more quickly, and others are still very much in the dark ages. So yes, while we do have people who still believe that a woman's place is in the kitchen and in the other room, on the other hand, you have people who are waking up. You have people from all walks of life who are waking up to see the value of women. I will never forget the day I was in a taxi, and the taxi man who told me he has 5 daughters, and he said he doesn't joke with their education. He said because he knows that they are the ones for the future. He said people make fun of him and abuse him. He said he knows what he's doing. He said he knows that his daughters are going to be great. And he was a taxi man. So people are coming to understand. You understand that it's about what you invest in a person, in a human being, that you're going to get out of that human being. And when you level the playing field for all your children, you will find out that your children will maximize. Each child will be unique, each child will be different, each child will bring something of value to the table. So human capital development under the National Gender Policy, for example, is about ensuring that every human being has the ability to maximize their human value, their human capabilities, so that they can feed back, not just to themselves, to their families, but to the society at large.
The United Nations Office on Drug and Crime in a 2021 report stated that 1 out of every 5 adult women above the age of 35 years have experienced one form of abuse or the other. In view of this prevalence in gender violence and abuse, to what extent has the tripartite laws in operation in Nigeria addressed these issues?
Okay, that's the issue of sexual violence now. I actually wrote a book chapter on that recently, this year. Did you say 1 out of every 5?
Yes.
That's a very conservative figure. It's actually higher. It's actually higher. That's the reported figure. That doesn't take into cognizance the many, many women who are silenced, who are shamed into not coming out to talk about the violence that they experience. I've encountered them. I encountered one even just day before yesterday. So we have a culture of silence, a culture of shaming, stigmatization, and shunning women who are victims of violence. And not just women, even men who are victims of gender-based violence and sexual violence are ashamed to come out and admit. And then again, the institution, the system, the gender response mechanism that should be in place, either through law enforcement in the police and the judiciary, is often not friendly towards people who report violence. That again is changing. Government has made some steps. But back to the main question. You were talking about the tripartite legal system. Part of what I addressed also in my lecture, if you would recall, is that the triple legal system that we have of common law, customary law, and Sharia law has often shown, I think, a lot of contradiction. contradiction, and even with the Constitution, because we can add the Constitution, which is the grand norm when it comes to the legal, rights and duties of a citizen. You find out that some of the rights that are guaranteed under statutory law are not readily available, accessible to people under customary law. Whether you're talking about in the issue of marriage, child custody, or you're talking about, issues of even civil and criminal matters. Very often there's a wide disparity between customary law and Sharia law and statutory law. One good example again is the issue of rights, widowhood rights, where you find out that when a husband dies in some cultures, the woman gets nothing. In fact, she herself becomes a property to be inherited. You understand? And all sorts of laws there around purification, how to, how things going forward. So yes, the triple legal system has been x-rayed by gender scholars. And the idea, or I think the recommendation, is that government needs to initiate a process of harnessing the laws to eradicate all these obnoxious laws that are at variance with statutory law, so that we can have one legal system across the country in which everybody can access their rights.
There was this narrative that a wife cannot be raped by her husband.
Okay. What is rape? Okay, rape is having forceful intercourse with somebody against their wish. Can a husband force his wife to have intercourse against her wish? Of course he can. One story readily comes to mind. Of course, this is also within the whole aspect of sexual violence that you talked about earlier. And sexual violence is real. Women are the main victims, but they are not the only victims. Even men too can be victims of sexual violence. Men against men, women against men, or whatever. So also I want us to make it clear that sexual violence is not purely a women's issue. But I came across a case some years ago. And it's a very real case. The woman had a cesarean section. She got home. The doctors had warned her that, look, for the next 6 weeks, you need to stay off sexual intercourse. And after a few days, her husband insisted on having sexual intercourse with her. And in the course of it, because back in those days, they used to use the sutures that are not the dissolvable type of sutures, the ones that you have to go back in after some days and have them removed. And after, a while, the sutures came undone and her intestines were out. They literally had to rush her to hospital holding her intestines. If that is not rape, I don't know what is rape. It was not consensual. She complained and said, look, I'm not well. The doctor has said I shouldn't. For now, please be patient. He wouldn't hear. He insisted. I even know a woman who her husband, she got to know that her husband was having affairs, extramarital affairs. And she had gone repeatedly to see her doctor to treat sexually transmitted disease. And so she told me that, look, if you want to continue having affairs, and I'm not interested in having it because I'm embarrassed to keep going for treatment. And so one day he took a gun and at gunpoint made her remove her clothes and said, whether you like it or not, I'm having a sexual intercourse with you. At gunpoint, and I know this woman personally, so it's not even a second-hand story. And there are stories upon stories upon stories. So can a husband rape his wife? Of course he can. There's no doubt about it. But unfortunately, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and Nigerian law in general is yet to get onto the international bandwagon of acknowledging that rape is a possibility in marriage.
Now, what should be the role of the family, civil society groups, the traditional institutions, security agencies, and custodians of the law?
See, number one, the family. The family should protect their child from violence. We've had cases of a woman being beaten by her husband, running home, and they say, go back. Go back. We've married you off, go back. And a woman will go back and some of them end up getting killed because the husband is now emboldened. They say, hey, they didn't want you now. And he now knows that he can do as he wants to do with her. So the families have to make it very clear that gender-based violence is a non-negotiable, absolute no-no. That starts from the family. The family has to protect. The problem is this culture of shame that we have, that, no, let them not say that my daughter got married and came back. So whatever she sees there, she should just accept it. You understand? And sometimes the teaching, the cultural teaching, the socialization is such that we train women to expect and accept violence. It's like, how they, what they call it? How they hakurini. You understand? Marriage is patience. They will tell the woman, be patient, no matter what you see there. So they are preparing her that it's going to be, yes, exactly. So those are the kind of things. So the family has to protect. We have seen, and when I say we, those of us in gender activism, in women's rights protection, we have seen a lot of cover-up from families.
When it's incest.
Yes, that was what I was going to do. I have too many examples. So this year, we had a case of a clergyman who was having some sexual interaction with his 3-year-old daughter. And it was uncovered. It was brought out. It was even the little baby herself, the girl that brought it. She didn't know. She was just saying it. So it was like, what was happening? Now, he denied it. And then his family and his religious community rose up against the mother for trying to come out to expose him. Do you understand? So it became almost a blackmail. And at a point she said, okay, I'm withdrawing the case. I'm withdrawing the case. Simply because his family and his religious community, his faith community family, did not want him exposed. I know of a particular case of a woman who sent her 14-year-old daughter to another clergyman, who was her cousin, to go and deliver a message. When she got there, he locked her in the room and raped her. She went back home and told her mother. The mother said, keep quiet so that you don't expose our shame. Do you understand? Family. So often families are implicated in cover-up. Families do not want a situation whereby their family member will be stigmatized or indicted. But they rather the victim of the violence to suffer the shame and the pain of that violation. So that's one aspect of family. I think one of our biggest problems in fighting sexual violence in particular is family. That family is the one that is like the major bottleneck. Number 2, you talked about civil society. Civil society, to me, is the saving grace. If this issue has become so popular, if this issue is even being addressed at all, it's because of the work of civil society. Civil society are the ones shouting, organizing, mobilizing, trying to provide some sort of, redress and respite. But I think civil society can still do more, in the sense that to some extent, a lot of what we are doing is splintered. You understand? People are working in silos. And I think that we need to build more coalitions and hold the political class much more accountable for action. And then I think we need to begin to expose people with it, not just perpetrators number 1, but also security and law enforcement agents that cover up for perpetrators, that refuse to investigate and prosecute perpetrators. And there are a whole lot of those ones, whether they are in the court system or in the police system. We have a whole lot of people that do not do the due diligence of protecting citizens' rights. What about traditional rulers? Traditional rulers have a strong role to play because they are the gatekeepers. Some years back, I think it was 2018, we organized a project. That project was building the capacity of grassroots women to get involved in peace building. Peace building for us, we look at it extensively or expansively, comprehensively, to mean that human beings must be secure in their homes and in the public. So we are talking about eradicating insecurity and violence right from the home front into the general society. In the course of this project, we were able to strengthen the capacity of women to the extent that traditional rulers in the local governments in which we did this project in Plateau State now began to invite women to be part of traditional ruling councils, in which many of them were put in, I don't know whether to call it a committee, but they were given the responsibility to deal with some of these violence cases. And it had such great effect, to the point that some of the traditional rulers came and told us that it had so much helped, in building bridges between couples and also dealing with perpetrators of violence in their communities. So these were traditional rulers. In fact, we gave them an award. We called them gender champions. We awarded these traditional rulers, about 8 of them. We awarded them awards. We gave them awards as gender champions. So the traditional rulers are the gatekeepers. At the level of their society, they are the ones that have to hold people accountable for the way people are treated within households. It has to be the traditional rulers.
Very engaging conversation there with Professor Fumilayo Paramalam MNI. Wouldn't you agree? Watch out for the concluding part of that interview in our next episode. Stay tuned to NIPSS Policy TV.
Keep watching.
Keep watching.
Keep watching NIPSS Policy TV.
It's new, it's fresh, it's all about policies and strategies. Watch out for NIPSS Policy TV programs on NTA News 24. Tune in on Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on DSTV Channel 419, GoTV Channel 26, Star Times Channels 101 and 433, and Free TV Channel 703. Miss this and miss out on policies that will affect you and our country. Join us.
What the government should do is, as they reserve some slots just for the women, at least for a start, not as if it should be something, just for a start, just reserve some spots for the women. So at the end of the day, let's see how it goes. The mere fact that a woman is always seen to be under a man may be a problem too. That we should not overlook. That's why we need to keep teaching both the men and the women as well of what it entails, or what should be done, basically, that women can actually go into politics well.
What government should do about increasing the women inclusiveness in government, I think it has to start even from educating the girl child. I think once we encourage more girls to go to school and to stay in school, and do all that it takes to allow them to complete their, up to the tertiary level of education. I think once a woman is educated and she knows her rights, I think she will do a lot to better her chances in being in many aspects of life, which includes even politics. Culture and religion really plays a big role in how women are even perceived generally. I know for me as a Muslim, we know that there is even a verse in the Holy Quran which says a man is above the woman. Yes, we agree with that. But again, the same Holy Book also allows for the right of a woman, allows for the right to educate a woman, and for a woman to aspire to either work. I believe that a man is biologically has more privileges, has some advantages over a woman. But then in terms of basic fundamental human right, which includes education, the right, to enjoy most of the basic needs of a human being, I think if everybody can be allowed, then we won't have any problem.
The government should do like this kind of awareness that you people are doing. If you do this kind of awareness, when the women know that yes, they have a role to play in government, then the women will now sit up. Sometimes early marriage, most of them, they should educate them by going to school. Some of the culture, they like putting young girls into early marriage. But if those young girls, they are educated, they will know their right. Most of the things that they don't know their right. That's why you see women have been looking down in this kind of situation. So if we can, like this awareness, do it in churches, in malls, everywhere, going to, palaces, so that they will aware them that this position is not just for men, that women too have their own role to play. So that's why they say there is a saying that says, what a man can do, a woman can even do it better.
There exists actual present information. Government has enough policy. I think the awareness themselves is the women to take it up themselves. It is all there. Are women taking it themselves and taking it up? We should not say government. There's awareness, there's advocacy. There's advocacy. Not everywhere there's advocacy about women. But it is we who are not taking it. We don't need advocacy. You see, the world, I have a quote, I have a famous quote. The world doesn't wait for anybody halfway. You have to go and conquer the world. You can't sit on your comfort and say women are being marginalized. What have you done to stop this marginalization? Where have you come outside to contest? Have you come outside to say you have you got yourself out to that you want to contest?
The National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS, Kuru, in collaboration with Conference for African Studies, have organized a 4-day intensive training for participants on strategic leadership course on sustainable cities and communities in Nigeria at the Political Party Center of the Institute. Had in attendance was the representative of the Director General, Brigadier General C.F.J. Udaya, retired MNI, Secretary and Director of Administration, the Director of Studies, Professor Fumi Paramalam, MNI, Professor Fatai Aremu, MNI, Professor Shola Adeyonju, MNI, Head, Public Affairs Department, members of Research Directorate, consultants, and participants. While giving a course brief, Professor Aremu Fatai, MNI, said, the course is meant to equip frontline practitioners with the ability to develop strategies and policies that will bring about sustainable development in communities and cities in the country.
This course, and we believe it will contribute to the good work that NIPSS is already doing. Over the next 10 years, we'll be able to look back to say NIPSS has contributed to the development of sustainable cities and communities in Nigeria.
Speaking on behalf of the DG, Brigadier General C.F.J. Utaya, retired MNI, stated that the National Institute is a key player in policy formulation and implementation in Nigeria.
I think that it is time the National Institute took the bull by the horn to see how we can impact on this very important area of our lives and our living. And I think that this is the reason why the National Institute has partnered with the Conference for African Studies to put this course and develop further policies that will help to make our communities and environments livable, not just livable, but livable in a sustainable manner in the long run. I want to encourage the participants of this course, because we are not to be discouraged by the few numbers that are here. Anything that you start, especially when you start them well, they are not very popular, you will get something of this nature. But I assure you that going forward, that this will be one of the most popular courses in this institute. Not only because of its impact on governance, but because of its impact on the overall health of the Nigerian communities and societies.
While thanking those present, Elder Oloruniran, one of the organizers of the program, said, "The idea of the course is centralized on developing communities and cities."
My belief that this particular course will grow to the extent that it will be to amazement of everybody.
Amen.
So our next edition, I know that hundreds of people will troop down here on their own account, by the grace of God. So my CEO, Chief Bayabiola, thank you very much. With this, I say thank you to every one of you. And by the time we are having the second edition of this program by March next year, by the grace of God, I know that we shall all be singing that, oh, glory be to God. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you all.
Professor Fumi Paramalam, MNI, in her speech said, environmental sustainability is an all-embracing issue that encompasses the people's way of life, stating that it is also an idea whose time has come.
Because environmental sustainability and the sustainability of cities in particular is a comprehensive, holistic, all-embracing issue. It's not just about, it's not a narrow field. It literally encompasses the way of life. The global south must develop, but it must develop on its own terms. It must develop in a way that is culturally sensitive and compliant with the rights and the knowledge systems of its own people. And I think there's no area where this must be very, very critical than the issue of sustainable cities. And we're not trying to just import uncritically, without interrogation, the way of life of Western societies. And what China did, because we visited a village, in fact, one village and one farm, a farming village. And what we saw they did was that they consulted with the people and asked the people what sort of modernization do we want. What sort of convention of our lifestyle towards a developed world do we want? And the people gave their input. We were amazed at the village we went to. Two things that I saw in that village that astounded me was that they created a space for town council meeting, town hall meeting, where the elders will sit and look at it, very modern or very traditional. And so they showed us that we can have sustainable cities, we can have sustainable environment, and it must be in terms with the culture, the civilization of our people. And that is why this forum is critical, is essential. This is a life-changing course for our people.
The program, first of its kind, is part of the Institute's wider mandate for people to reflect and come up with solutions towards making Nigeria a better society. At the end of the training, participants are expected to be knowledgeable on the development of livable and sustainable cities and communities, which is a challenging issue in Nigeria. Our communities should be a reflection of our economy. The core strategies for achieving the objectives of the national gender policy include policy, partnership, and program reforms through mainstreaming of gender concerns at all levels, gender education and capacity building to enhance necessary technical expertise and positive gender culture, legislative reforms to guarantee gender justice and respect for human rights, and economic reforms for enhanced productivity and sustainable development, especially that which addresses the needs of women and children and other vulnerable groups. Information and communication research and data, as well as monitoring and evaluation, are supportive strategies for achieving the policy goal. We have been able to convey the opinion of our guests to you on gender promotion in Nigeria. However, experts are calling on Human Rights Commission, Ministry of Justice, and gender promoters all over the country to stand firm and defend gender-based inequality
in Nigeria. That's it today on Policy Focus. See you next time. I am Lydia Odije Ochi.